Hey everybody, Aaron here. I wanted to take a second and invite you to consider joining us this fall for Cause School of Leadership. Maybe you've been feeling the pull of God. Maybe you feel like there's a next step for you to take, or God wants to do something great through your life. I want you to consider that this might be a place where you can prepare to live out God's purpose. We've got all kinds of courses. Rachelle and I will be teaching. We've got Bible courses. We've got practical leadership. This is a place where you can learn and grow into the leader God has called you to be in the context of the local church. It's a 9-month program. I promise you're gonna grow. So hey, pray about it, consider doing it. You can apply as soon as today online at thecausecda.com. Hey, I can't wait to see you this fall at Cause School of Leadership. Well, hey, without further ado, we're going to continue, like I said, in All the Fields, the sermon series we've been in for the last several weeks. And I hope, have you been getting something from God through this series? And if you've missed the messages, you can go online and catch up there on our YouTube channel or on our website or app. But today, for part 3, I asked my wife, co-lead pastor, the real pastor of the Cause Church, if she would preach to us. Could you stand to your feet and welcome my beautiful wife, Rachelle, as she comes?
Thank you. Okay, I have been loving this summer series, All the Fields, because I am practical, and I believe that no matter who you are or where you've been or what you got going on in your life, we all deal with emotional struggles. We all struggle in this area. So I don't care who you are, these messages have been very applicable to our lives in every aspect. And so I encourage you through this series, bring friends, like Pastor Aaron said, share online, because these are so powerful. The world knows that they're in emotional distress. You do not have to tell them that. They know that. And so for us to be able to offer some hope and to share that with them, it's phenomenal. So we've gotten set free from insecurities. The first week, we talked about insecurities, and we have been set free from any type of insecurity. We're secure in Christ, so that was powerful. And then last weekend, we got set free from bitterness. So any bitterness that was in our heart, we've been dealing with and praying to God about. And so this week, we are going to overcome, disappointment. I got hung up because Aaron kept saying, because my whole sermon is about disappointment. And he's like, you didn't say disappointment very much in your sermon. And I'm like, I didn't. He's like, no, you didn't say it very much. He's like, you used a whole bunch of other words. And I'm like, I did. So then I was like, really like in my notes this morning, like writing disappointment on everything. So you're going to hear the word disappointment so many times today, you're going to be sick of it. So if you are taking notes today, my sermon title is, Well, That Was Disappointing. Jude and Reeve had a very disappointing situation that happened to them a couple days ago. So I don't care if it's a big disappointment, if it's small disappointment. We have all dealt with disappointment on different levels. And for them, what happened a couple days ago is they're super excited. Aaron had been preaching at a camp all week. So he was gone all week. And so they wanted to show him that they could catch fish in the Coeur d'Alene Lake because they want to get a pet fish from the lake, which is so incredibly disgusting. But I wanted to entertain them. So I was like, yeah, you can catch a fish. And if you do, we'll keep it and it'll be our pet. So I was like, yeah, go for it. So they're really excited to show them. So they're getting all ready. They're all dressed. And they realize they don't have their goggles. Now, they have to have their goggles. That's the most important aspect of being able to catch fish, is you have to be able to see under the water. So they were so disappointed. They were just like trying not to cry, because what happened was we left the goggles in Aubrey's car. So the goggles were very far away. So I'm texting Aubrey. I'm trying to get a hold of Aubrey. I'm calling her. I'm like, where are you? Where are you? We need the goggles. She's like, I'm really far away. Do you want me to come back? I'm like, no, it's fine. So I'm telling the kids, well, maybe you could go to a movie, or maybe you could go do something else. And they're just so sad, because for their whole live stream, for a whole 30 minutes, they had this anticipation and expectation in their life that they were going to go catch fish, and they were so disappointed. So of course, like a good dad that Aaron is, he went to Big Five and got them some new goggles, because Lord forbid our children ever experience the pain of disappointment. So that day, they really understood what disappointment was. So for some of us, like, we laugh, okay, that's cute. But for some of us, it's bigger. Through the day, we can go through really small disappointments, but sometimes there's some big, devastating blows that we experience in our life. Disappointments can be you didn't get the dream job that you're expecting to get. You were not born with long, beautiful eyelashes like you were wanting. That can be devastating. Now you have to go pay for them all the time. That's the worst. Maybe you're disappointed because you didn't go to college like you were planning on. Maybe you lost a loved one. Maybe you were brought up in an unstable home, and that's something that's very difficult for you to get past. For some of us, it's, I didn't get to pick the restaurant after church, and that is disappointing. That is our marital struggle and problem. And now the kids are getting more opinionated, and they're starting to chime in where they want to go. We're like, be quiet. We can't fight with you two about what restaurant we're going to after church. So all of us can look back and think of a time that we've been disappointed. And for some of us, you're sitting there thinking no, I'm currently living in the greatest disappointment of my life. So for some of us, it's been in the past. For some of us, right now. But I'm hoping with this message, what we can do is whether you're in it now, I promise you at some point you will be in it. So even if you're like, well, this isn't really for me, tuck it away, put it on a shelf, and at some point, someday, hopefully God will bring this to your remembrance and really help you through your time of discouragement. So no matter where you're at, we can all relate, or we all will relate. Now, I feel like the best time in life is when you're just this young, 16, 17, 18-year-old, you're in high school, you're about to graduate, all these wonderful things. That's just such an exciting experience and such an exciting time. And you look at those young people, you're just thinking you have no idea what's going to hit you. Bills are coming. And so our daughter, she keeps hashtagging she's adulting. And it's she went down to the DMV and she's adulting. I'm like, oh girl, you have no idea. It gets so much worse from the DMV. So let me pray over us this morning. God, I just thank you and praise you that this is a marked moment. God, I pray that you anoint today, and God, that you're just changing our hearts, that you're making us more like you, you're drawing us closer, and that, God, you're revealing to us just different places in our heart that maybe have been dead or dried up, that need healing, that need restoration. God, any discouragement that we've walked in with, God, I just thank you that at the end of this morning, we're going to be able to hand that to you, God, and we're going to see you do something miraculous in it. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Amen. So today we're going to talk about one of my favorite Bible characters in the Bible, and that is Samson. I love Samson, and my daughter Reeve, she loves Samson too. That's the story she always picks when she's in kids ministry, and that's what she always picks at home. She wants to read about Samson. So we are going to read about Samson today, and we are going to go to Judges 13, and I'm going to read out of the Message Bible. So Judges 13, verse 1. And then the people of Israel were back at it again, doing what was evil in God's sight. God put them under the dominion of the Philistines for 40 years. So the Israelites are discouraged. They have been in slavery for 40 years. They are the underdogs. They are not doing well for 40 years. That is a long time. For some of us, if we're having struggles for a week, we think we're just going to implode. But for them, it was 40 years. Verse 2, at the time there was a man named Manoah from Zorah, from the tribe of Dan. His wife was barren and childless. The angel of God appeared to her and told her, I know that you are barren and childless, but you're going to become pregnant and bear a son. But take much care, drink no wine or beer, eat nothing ritually unclean. You are, in fact, pregnant right now, carrying a son. No razor will touch his head. The boy will be God's Nazarite from the moment of his birth. He will launch the deliverance from Philistine oppression. So this is some good news, not only for Manoah and his wife, but for the nation of Israel. So for the sake of time, I'm going to paraphrase a lot of Samson's story because we just don't have time to go through it all. But I would encourage you, read it this week. It is a good story. You just can't make these things up. It's the best documentary. I love Netflix documentaries. It's the best reality TV documentary you could ever read. So read it this week because it's so good. Now, at this point, Manoah and his wife, they did not have any children. So I'm sure, as we all would, they were crying out to God for a child. They wanted a child. So they are godly people. They're crying out for a child. So this angel of God shows up and Manoah's wife and tells her that you're pregnant. So that's amazing. Okay, she's pregnant. That's exciting. And that her child is going to be set apart for God. What mother doesn't want their child to be set apart for God? So this is good news. She's excited. She's excited. And then this child is going to be used to set you free from your enemies. Like, what an amazing promise from God this is. So not only is God answering this couple's prayer for a child, but he's also answering Israel's prayer, this nation's prayer for freedom. So it's kind of a big deal. Now, Manoah is shocked. He can't even imagine that the angel of God has appeared to his wife. He cannot believe it. So he's asking her a bunch of questions. He's like, what do the angels say? And she's trying to explain to him. And he's so worried that he's not going to raise his son right and he's not going to do what the angel said, that he starts to pray to God, like, God, please send the messenger back again. I would like to talk to him because I need to have some answers here. So these are some godly people. They want to do what's right. They want to be good parents. They want to obey God. So they're taking this promise very, very seriously. So the angel of God comes again, and it's not actually an angel, it's actually Jesus. And so Jesus comes to them and appears to them. And so they sacrifice a goat, and then they realize that they've been in the face of God. So then they get kind of scared too, because they're like, I just saw the face of God. I hope, so Manoah's like, I hope I don't die. I hope and he's getting all worried. And his wife's like, don't worry about it. I don't think he would appear to us and tell us we're gonna have a child if he's gonna kill us. And so there's a lot of chaos and a lot of excitement and a lot of emotion in this moment, really high expectations. This was a very exciting season in their life. So in Judges 13, 24 and 25, we read, the woman gave birth to a son. They named him Samson. The boy grew and God blessed him. The Spirit of God began working in him while he was staying at the Danite camp. So we all have dreams and we all have hopes and desires for our future. Even as a young child, we kind of have a certain idea of what we see our life looking like. And for children, little boys like, oh, I want to be a soccer player, a football player, a fireman. Reeve says all girls at her school want to be a vet and work with animals. And so she doesn't want to because she's not going to be like all of them, she said. So kids have a specific, even at a really young age, they want to get married. Oh, what Judah's telling us, he was going to have 6 girls or boys. So he's going to have all boys and only 1 girl because he's the only boy in the family. So it's he wanted to torture his daughter and get back at girls. I don't know. So he's like, I'm going to have all boys and 1 girl and she'll be the only one. I was like, that seems mean and weird. And then Reeve, her hopes and dreams is that she's going to live across the street from me and I'm going to help her raise her kids and she's always going to be around with me. And if I'm old, that she's going to take care of me at all times. And so she's got this whole vision for her life where she's just going to take care of me. And it's wonderful. And I love her for that. Kids, they're envisioning their house, their dog, we're all envisioning these, what our life is going to look like at a very young age. It just comes natural. These hopes and dreams just kind of spring out of us. So imagine growing up being Samson. So his parents went around telling everybody about the best birth announcement that has ever existed. All their friends and family knew that an angel had appeared to them. That they're saying God told us this and then God showed us that. And so they're going around letting people know because this is a big deal. This isn't something you keep secret. So Samson's mom's going around telling her girlfriends oh, my son's so big and he's so strong and he's so holy. He loves Jesus so much. And, the Philistines are going down. No one can take him on. She's going around bragging. Her son is amazing. He's phenomenal. He's basically an honor student, captain of the football team, holy priest, dog-loving superhero of a man of all time. And so everyone knows Samson. His parents are super, super proud. How could they not be? And Samson has a lot of pressure on him. He's got a lot riding on his ability to kill the Philistines. So to say that Manoah and his wife were proud of Samson would not be an exaggeration. This was a pretty big moment, a pretty special time for them. So not only had God answered their prayer, he had so blown it out of the water and superseded anything they could have possibly have ever imagined or hoped for. I don't think that would have ever been in their thought process that God could do so much through them and in them. So they were excited. But little do they know that right around the corner, that there was going to be a lot of pain, a lot of heartache, and a lot of trouble for them that was about to enter this scene that they were not aware of. And so disappointment is going to be soon following this family. We've all experienced disappointments, and I'm sure you can sit there this morning right now and even think okay, most of us have at least one really big one. We're okay, this is my thing. This is the thing that I've carried. And for me, it was when I was in my early 20s. That's when I really was hit. Before that, I had a really good childhood. My life seemed very exactly what I wanted it to be. Everything was very happy and light. And then all of a sudden, just boom, I was hit in my early 20s. And so hopefully today when I share my story, whether or not you've experienced something similar, you can take something away from it and you can, take some of my story and apply it to you. So for me, I was living in Connecticut. My then husband and I had moved up to Connecticut with a bunch of my Bible school friends because we were planting a church up there in a really small town, kind of out in the woods. And we were going to serve as youth pastors there. And then I also did like kids ministry and just kind of how you do with church planting, kind of just did everything in the church. So we were up there for about 2 years. And then life for me quickly went south. I was about to receive a blow that I was not expecting. I had found myself in an unimaginable situation that I couldn't have even fathomed that was going to be happening. So I remember the day I got on the airplane. I was with I had my 1 and 2-year-old daughters, and I remember I'm heading back to Spokane to go live with my parents, and I knew full well that my then husband was going to be headed to prison. So I get a phone call one night. The next morning, I'm on a plane with basically just the clothes on our back, heading home in just utter despair. Now, in my marriage, it was very, very verbally abusive and then often physically abusive. So I knew it wasn't good and there was some darkness there, but I had no idea the depth of sin and darkness that had been going on in secret in my husband's life as we're ministering in the church. Had no idea. So I was shocked, completely floored. I was filled with grief. The reality of my situation was so overwhelming to me, I could hardly breathe. Disappointment would be an understatement at this point in my life. I was disappointed with how things in my life were turning out. Everything that I held as dear and as important as special and as what I wanted for my life, it was just gone. For me, I wanted a stable family unit. I wanted to be in a family. That was gone. I wanted to be in ministry and be a part of a church family and involved in the church. That was gone. A lot of my identity and who I was as a person was just kind of stripped away in a moment. It was all gone. So all that was swirling around in my head is like, I have been living with a monster. I've been living with a monster. Like, I just couldn't even believe it. The second thing is like, my children are going to grow up in a broken home. My children are not going to have a dad. I'm going to be a single mom. They're just like, how is God going to bless us? Like, I just felt very like exposed and kind of thrown to the side. And for me, like, my parents were married, my grandparents were married. Honestly, I didn't really know anyone that was divorced. So that wasn't a concept that I understood, like, oh, there's light at the end of the tunnel, or like, you can get through this. I had no reference point for this at all. So it was very destructive. I couldn't even imagine. And for me, in that situation, I felt completely disqualified from ever doing ministry, which was really hard for me because that was a dream I had in my heart from the age of 11. So that was just gone, and that just felt like that will never be. And I just thought, that's okay, God, I love you, but that will just be something that I just don't do anymore. And that was going to be okay, but it was still very disappointing for me. But even though that was the most disappointing, worst moment in my entire life, there was still just this peace inside of me thinking like, I am free. Like, I got on that plane and this huge weight kind of lifted off of me, and I'm like, I can enter in this new season and I'm free and it's over and I can move forward. And so there was a sense of, even in that pain and grief, there was a sense of relief that it was over. Even though there were days, like, I would wake up, like, I would be asleep, and I would wake up in this full panic, and I would just think to myself, this cannot be my life. This cannot be my life. This cannot be my life. And many of you sitting here just have had those moments where you're just looking around thinking, like, this is not my life. This is not what I expected. This is not what I signed up for. How can this be my life? And that was me. I just couldn't even believe, actually couldn't even utter the words and wouldn't even identified it as this. But being a single mom, I couldn't even have been like, oh, I'm a single mom. I would have never have said that. But at the time, I'm just like, I'm a single mom. I'm like doing this on my own. I'm all by myself. I was so shocked where my life had taken this turn. I could not even fathom that this could be possible. And Samson is about to take a disappointing turn as well. Samson grew up and he was big and he was strong and he was killing the Philistines. He was doing what God had called him to do. He was on track to accomplish everything that God had set before him. There was only one problem with Samson. Samson loved the ladies. This was his big issue in life. So what he does is Samson marries he wants to marry a Philistine woman. So he tells his parents, I want to marry this Philistine woman. And they, of course, do not want him to because this is the enemy. Like, what are you doing? No, we don't approve of this. But he wasn't having it. So they're like, okay, they didn't really have any choice. So he wants to marry this woman. That didn't work out. It was a huge mess. It was like a Jerry Springer kind of mess. It was a scene like no other. Drama. He's like throwing out riddles and tricking people. There was a lot of killing. A lot of people died because of this like union. And then she ended up marrying his best man. So this was drama for Samson. So what does Samson do? So he's in a bad situation. He's probably a little disappointed. His wife just married the best man at his wedding, and so that's kind of done. So what he does is he decides, well, then I am just going to be with a prostitute. So he moves on to the next woman, and he just thinks, well, I'm not going to even marry this one. So he just goes on about his way, going to the next woman. This woman's name was Delilah. So here Samson is, he's hanging out with the enemy. Samson is supposed to be set apart for God and holy and living a different kind of lifestyle, but Samson is partying. Samson's doing whatever he wants, however he wants, and he doesn't have a lot of accountability because obviously no one's going to go to him and really be like, hey, you need to change your ways. Samson's really strong, and he likes to kill people. That's like his thing. So Samson's just doing whatever he wants. Now, I'm sure Manoah and his wife at night would be laying in bed crying out to God, like, why? What is happening? What did we do wrong? What could have we done differently? This wasn't the plan. This is not what we wanted. They were horrified. This was not what they had pictured. And they're probably thinking to themselves, God, you gave us this kid. Like, this was your idea. This wasn't our idea. We didn't sign up for this. This was your idea. What are you doing? Where are you? Why aren't you helping us? They were very disappointed. All that hope and excitement was so quickly turning into such a huge disappointment and such a huge mess for them. So now Delilah is evil. She's no good. She is a part of the Philistine army. They're asking her to spy on Samson to find out where he gets his strength from. Then they are going to try to take his strength. So she is a spy. She's basically like this super sexy spy that you see in every James Bond movie ever to exist. So it's very cliche and it should be very obvious. But Samson, he's just not picking up on this. So every night, Delilah would ask Samson, like, what is your secret? Like, where does your strength come from? And he would lie to her and be like, oh, well, if you tie me up with ropes, like, I will be weak. And then so that night, she ties him up with ropes and then yells out, like, the Philistines are coming. And then he breaks the ropes and she gets mad at him because he lied to her. And this happens many times. He says, well, if you braid my hair and put it in a loom, like just very weird, detailed lies, then I will lose my strength. And so she does that. That doesn't work. She's starting to get mad. She's getting really frustrated with Samson. So she's got to really turn up her manipulation. So here what we see in Judges 16:15 is what she says. How can you say I love you when you don't even trust me? 3 times now you've toyed with me like a cat with a mouse, refusing to tell me the secret of your great strength. Now, you think Samson, this would have been after a couple of failed attempts where she's trying to take his strength away. He would have realized what's going on, but he didn't. So Delilah finally manipulates him into sharing his secret, which of course she turns around and destroys him with that information. And I'm sure Manoah and his wife saw this coming. Of course, he's literally sleeping with the enemy. This is not going to go well for him or for the nation or for his parents or for anyone. This is a bad scenario. So Samson was headed down a destructive road, but he just would not listen. And so Delilah cut Samson's hair and his strength went away. So as the Philistine army is whisking Samson away and taking him away, I'm sure that he was very disappointed in himself at this moment. He not only disappointed himself, he disappointed his parents, he disappointed a nation. So this is a really sad moment of utter despair for Samson. And then, of course, like you would, Manoah and his poor wife, they're going around town. People are looking at them. I'm sure people were whispering because misery gets around quickly. So when you have this like great, amazing son and he falls, people are going to notice and people are going to talk about it. The great and mighty Samson was great and mighty no more. And I am sure that was a huge burden for his family to carry. So what do you do in your life? It's just utter disappointment. When you're looking around thinking like, this is just not good. And it might not be your whole life. It might be just be different areas in your life. Maybe it's a marriage. Maybe it's your children. Maybe it's your job. Maybe it's, again, like what we're talking about, all the feels, like just your emotional state is just off. Some of life's disappointments are self-inflicted, as in Samson's situation. There's things that we do and there's habits that we have that we are causing this pain and this disappointment that we have actually the control to be able to stop, which is amazing. And so some of it's self-inflicted, but many times we're disappointed by people. We have people around us that are doing things to us that are disappointing, and that causes a lot of pain and hurt, which can also lead to bitterness because they're hurting us this way. And then sometimes life just happens. And when that happens, when life just happens, we don't know who to blame, so we just point a finger up at God and blame God because, like, how could you allow this to happen? And sometimes it's just life. I remember a very specific moment. It was 2 or 3 weeks after that, like, hellish plane ride. Not only do I have 2 babies I'm trying to, like, keep quiet all by myself, like I am like a zombie in the plane, like I can't even think straight. So after that horrible car ride, about 2 or 3 weeks later, I had gotten a job at the church that I grew up in, and I was a teacher there. Working at the school. And so what they did to, like, kind of honor and bless the teachers is they paid for all the teachers to get to go to the women's conference that the church was hosting. So it was kind of mandatory where all the teachers were going to be sitting with each other. We're all going to this conference. Now for me, where I was at in life, where my whole life is destroyed, that was the last place I wanted to be, was at a women's conference. If you've never been to a women's conferences, I love them, but here's what they look like. High emotion, high energy, high spiritual environment, lots of women giggling and having fun. And I'm like, that is the last place I want to be. I did not want to go there because my life was a disaster. I was not giggling. I was not having fun. I just didn't want to go there. I was very broken. I wasn't ready to, like, and again, like, this is my home church. Everyone knows me. So I'm like, this is fun. They're all probably looking back like, oh, is Rachelle okay? Oh, I hope she's okay. Like, looking at me with pity. It was horrible. So I walk into this conference. I'm completely emotionally shut off because I'm like, okay, I got to get through this. So I'm like, walls up. Okay, I got to get through this night. Lisa Bevere was speaking, which she was my absolute favorite speaker, and I absolutely adored her. I loved her. I'd been to conferences that she had spoken at before. And actually, I could not tell you what she spoke on that night. I have no idea what she preached on. But I remember a little bit of hope started growing in my spirit. I just remember thinking, like, okay, God, I can see some light at the end of the tunnel. It's so amazing when you come into a spiritual environment and you're just in the house. It might not even be what someone's saying or someone's preaching, but God can start to just speak to you. And it might have nothing to do with the sermon. I know Pastor Aaron jokes about it a lot. He'll say, like, yeah, I preached the sermon, and someone came up to me and said, oh, God healed me this, and this happened. And Aaron's like, that had nothing to do with my sermon. But awesome, the Holy Spirit worked, and they got touched. And that's what it was like for me. I don't even remember what she talked about, but I remember just sitting there thinking, like, okay, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And this hope started growing in me. I thought, okay, I can do this. And I remember thinking, like, okay, right now, yes, I am the person in the back row that's completely broken. Their life is destroyed. I'm a shell of a person. But someday I'm going to declare his goodness to others. And so I got excited. I was thinking, okay, like, I see that God can use this. And trust me, I was sitting there knowing and understanding. I wasn't like in denial or trying to think about something else because I didn't want to deal with my current situation. I remember thinking, like, I know I'm broken. I know I need healing. I need restoration. My life is just a mess. But I know that someday God's going to use it. I know not today. I was not in a place that day to minister to anybody. I couldn't even minister to myself. But I knew that someday God was going to use it. And that's all I needed. There's just sometimes you just need a little hope to hold on to. So I didn't know what God was going to do, but I knew God was doing something, and he was growing something up inside of me that was very much against who I was as a person. At that time in my life, I was very legalistic. I was very black and white. And so for me, it just was what it was. My life was over. I wasn't going to get to do anything that God had called me to do. And that was just that. But something inside of me that was bigger than me, God, was taking over that kind of mindset and that kind of thinking. It gave me a different kind of hope to overcome. Yeah. And we're going to see this with Samson. So in Judges 16, 21 and 22, it says, the Philistines grabbed him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza. They shackled him in irons and put him to the work of grinding in the prison. But his hair, though cut off, began to grow again. This is my favorite part of the story. I don't know how you can read the Bible and just not start crying. God is so good, because it was not Samson's good intentions. It was not Samson's actions by any means. It was the grace of God that caused his hair to grow, and how gracious of God that we serve. So even in our mistakes or our ignorance, when things, sometimes we just don't know any better, or even in our sin, God is found faithful. So I'm sure Samson, he basically like grew up in the church essentially. Like he grew up knowing God. He had very godly parents. So I'm sure as soon as his hair was cut, man, his heart turned right back to God, because he's thinking, what have I done? Essentially, the one thing you asked of me, I threw it all away for a woman. So he had gone down a road further than I think he ever intended to go. And so I think when his hair got cut off, I'm sure he was shocked back into like, God, you need to help me. I don't know what to do now. Now my strength, I have none. I can't get out of this situation. And so he was in trouble. But what I love about Samson is even in his own sin and his own mistakes and his own self-inflicted pain, he cries out to God for vengeance. And God's people will never be put to shame. And so God did not let Samson be put to shame in any way. Even though Samson, he caused his own pain, he was doing his own thing, God was not about to let him be mocked and ridiculed. He was going to do something about this. So they bring Samson out to their party in their temple and chain him up on the pillars because they want to make fun of him and show how they defeated the mighty Samson. But what they didn't realize is God was giving Samson his strength back. So Samson cries out to God, God, just strengthen me once more. And so Samson knocks those pillars down. The temple comes coming down. And Samson killed more Philistines in his death than he did in his whole entire life. And so everything that God had called him to do, he had accomplished. Now, I'm sure that's not how Samson saw his life going in any way. That was not the picture that he had as a child. But even through going down the wrong road and mishaps and missteps, God still accomplished in him what God had intended to accomplish. And so at this, part of it, it's like, oh, Samson, that's sad. But for me, I'm thinking, no, we're all going to die. At least he died doing what God had called him to do, living in purpose. He can make his family proud. He can kind of regain his name back and his reputation. So very powerful. So how does that apply to us practically where we are? We sometimes read these stories in the Bible of Samson, and they're these big dramatic things, or even sometimes like my story, that's kind of big and dramatic. And for some of us, we don't have maybe a dramatic disappointment. Sometimes they're these little tiny disappointments that kind of they start to creep up and pile up and that we need to deal with. So if you're sitting there thinking well, I'm not like Samson, I don't have this horrible story like you, but we all have things, whether how big or small, that they start to stack up and they start to tear down who we are as people and separate us from God and from what we're called to do. So maybe you had an affair. Maybe your kids are not serving God. Maybe you're sick and in chronic pain, and that's not what you were expecting with your life. Maybe you're broke or work a crappy job. Whatever the disappointment is, God is so much bigger. Because I'm telling you what, sometimes working a mundane, crappy job for 30 years, that'll wear you down more than sometimes a really big, horrific event that happens in your life. Because you kind of sometimes with big events, for me, I knew, it was just very obvious, this is a horrible situation. Everyone around me let me know, you're in a horrible situation. So I was very aware that I need to deal with this horrible situation. But sometimes when your life's not so horrible, it's just kind of not what you want and not what you feel that God has for you. That will start to wear on you in a different way because it's not so obvious where people are like, oh, are you okay? Oh, let me pray for you. But it's just kind of there and it's, it, but nobody else knows it. So here are 4 don'ts when it comes to handling disappointment. 4 things you do not want to do if you're in a season of disappointment. Number 1, don't let disappointment cause you to be stuck. Do not get stuck mentally. Do not get stuck emotionally. Do not be stuck spiritually. And don't get stuck physically. Sometimes we just physically get stuck. Some people can't leave their home or go into different environments. Sometimes we're stuck mentally that we just cannot get over something that happened. For some of us, emotional, all the feels, we are just overly emotional. Things are out of control and we're stuck. Some of us are stuck spiritually. It's been a long time since we opened up the Bible. It's been a long time since we've been in church or been worshiping. And we just, because sometimes life's so disappointing, it's almost just too hard to. But if we can push through that pain, it's going to help us move forward quickly. So we don't want to be stuck. Number 2, don't let disappointment cause you to throw it all away. I see this so often. sometimes something that's small, that's, ruining some of your life, we cause it and let it manifest to ruin all of our life. And so don't ruin your whole life just because part of your life is not going well. Don't let one bad decision lead to the next bad decision that leads to the next bad decision. If you're on this road where you're just making really poor choices, you need to stop. You need to stop and take a moment. When you're disappointed and life is not what you thought it would be, stop. You need to pray. You need to get into the Word. You need to surround yourself with godly people and acknowledge in yourself, okay, I see that I'm making some really bad choices for my life, and they could be small choices, not things that, again, that are like these big, dramatic, horrible things that maybe even people around you know, but they're things that you know in your heart, decisions that you're making in your heart that you need to change. So surround yourself with godly people. Number 3, don't let disappointment cause you to hold on to other negative emotions. The problem with disappointment, sometimes it's this like floodgate where it's this open door to all these other bad emotions. Disappointment can cause anger in your life. You can get very angry when things don't go your way. And I remember there would be nights I'd be crying out to God, like I was angry. I was even angry at him. Like, why didn't you warn me? Like, why didn't you give me a heads up? Like, why didn't you allow me to like go through this in a way that wasn't so public and embarrassing? Don't let disappointment cause you to be apathetic. Sometimes apathy will set in because you're like, well, it just never works. Things just don't go right for me. And just this negative mindset can start to happen and you just become apathetic to life and you're not living your best life. Sometimes bitterness comes in where you're so bitter and you're so sad that you just can't move forward. For some people, it's depression. You literally are so depressed you can't get out of bed in the morning. And I know I would have been there. My problem is I had a 1-year-old and 2-year-old, so I couldn't stay in bed. I had no choice but to not be depressed because I had some kids to raise. But for some of us, it's like we can literally not get out of the bed because we are so disappointed with what life has thrown at us. For some of us, it's anxiety. We have so much anxiety of the future because we're so torn up and we can't forgive and let go of the past. And so we're just holding on to all this fear and anxiety. We need to let that go. So number 3, don't let your disappointment cause you to have other negative emotions. Don't let disappointment be something that just opens the floodgates. As soon as you recognize that disappointment in your life, take care of it as soon as you can. And then number 4, don't let your disappointment cause you to withdraw from people and to isolate yourself. Now, I wish I could go back and tell 20-something Rachelle to not isolate, but I am telling you what, I really isolated. Part of the reason was I was very embarrassed. I was horrified. And so talking about it or acknowledging it would have been more than I could have done. The more you talk about it, the more real it seems. And so that was not something I was willing to do. And I was just embarrassed. It's just, I didn't want that to be my story so much that I wasn't about to tell my story because that was just, I remember Aaron and I hung out for about a year. He hung out, he was a college and career pastor. And so, and then my house, I lived with my sister and one of my girlfriends. And so after, the college and career nights, the young adults nights, like people would come over to our house and they'd hang out. And I was there because I lived there. And so he was there. So he kind of hung out at my house for like a year before we started dating. And so I remember when we were going to start dating, I'm like, I had to tell him this horrible thing and it's just going to be so horrifying to him because he was like asking me out and I was rejecting him, but it was kind of, then I was like, well, maybe I'm not going to reject him. Maybe I will date him. But I'm like, oh, I had to tell him this horrible thing. Well, why it didn't dawn on me at the time, his best friend was my roommate's sister. So of course he knew the whole story. But I was so not sharing my story with anyone. I had no idea he knew. So when I had to like get the courage to like tell him like, oh, all these horrible things happened in my life. I just want you to know, like he already knew. So that was a huge relief. But that's how embarrassed I was about my story is that I did not share it with people. Even like the people I worked with that were girls I grew up with in high school and my really close friends, we just did not go there. We did not talk about that. Also for me, why I isolated is I felt like everything was so broken, it was just unfixable. So no, I'm not going to talk to you about my problems because you can't help me. And that's how I felt. I honestly felt in that moment, which was super arrogant and ignorant. I just felt like no one can help me. This is so big and so horrible that there's nothing you can do or nothing you can say that's going to make this better. So I'm just not going to say anything because it doesn't matter. And of course, I had loving and supportive friends and family that were all around me all the time. I was not alone by any means, but I needed something to help kind of guide me through that process and to kind of get some healing and get over some things. And I just did not have that. I did not allow that in my life. And again, like, yes, God came to me, and I spent years of like healing and restoration and growing so close to the Lord. But I really truly believe that process would have been sped up quite significantly had I let someone in to help me. And so I'd encourage you, do not isolate. The worst thing you can do is when you're in disappointment and life is not going your way, is to isolate. And I think it's human nature, because trust me, I know what it feels like to not want to walk into a church, to think like everyone's looking at me, everyone's going to know, I'm going to sit in the back row and hopefully nobody talks to me, and I'm going to leave as soon as service is over. I know what that feels like. So do not isolate. That is the worst thing you can do. Because here's the thing, everybody loves a comeback story. Everybody. I don't care who you are. Everyone loves a good comeback. We all love to root for the underdog. We're all sitting around hopeful and prayerful that people are going to get a breakthrough, because it's exciting. It's fun to see and watch. We do it through the news. We love news stories that are about the triumph of the human spirit. Like, no one wants the depressing, horrible news stories. We want like this exciting news story, like they got healed from cancer, and then they raised $100,000, then they went to Disneyland, and just all these wonderful things. You're like, yes, I'm so happy for them. This is so wonderful. We do that in sports. We love to root for the underdog when the team's like way, way behind and somehow they win, and it's exciting, and they weren't expected to win, and they win, and everyone's cheering, even the people on the opposite team, because it's so amazing that they came back like this. We do in our movies. Who doesn't love a victorious movie? For me, I like 300. Like, I love that movie. It's victorious. It's exciting. That's a rated R one. So I'm going to bring it down to PG, The Blind Side. He comes from nothing. Someone like takes a chance on him. Again, the grace of God, like just randomly gets chosen for this whole other life to become everything that he believes he should be. So amazing. We love The Blind Side. My daughter, Aubrey, loves to watch those kind of movies and just sit and sob uncontrollably. That's her favorite pastime. Sad, triumphant movies. Or Rocky. Who doesn't love Rocky? Every Rocky movie, Rocky's supposed to lose. And somehow he always wins, and it's always awesome. We love Rocky. As a kid, every kid back there in kids ministry, they love the story of David and Goliath. Someone small, they can relate to this. Someone small, and they defeat the giant, and they were insignificant, and God used them. We love a comeback story. And yet, so often in our own lives, we do not expect or want to receive a comeback for our own story. And so today, if I could have one thing that I would hope people would take away from is, why can't I have a comeback story? Why can't you have a comeback story and just be a church full of these comeback stories? And for me, I get a front row seat. I get to hear these stories, and they are amazing and they are phenomenal. And I'd encourage you, that's a lot of times in church, that is hard to do and hard to find, is knowing these stories. Where you're going to find them is honestly if you're serving on a team with a bunch of people, or if you're in a connect group, and then you're sitting around people and you're hearing their story, you're hearing their victories, you're hearing their defeats. And it's so inspiring, because we have some of the most beautiful stories in this church. So many different things are represented here. So I would encourage you, find someone, grab someone today before you leave, go out to coffee with them, hear their story. It will inspire you, because sometimes when we're in our own mess and we're disappointed and we're sad and we're despondent, we just start to be very inward focused, and we start to look inward, and it's really just narcissistic. It just gets so out of control, because all we can think about of ourselves. We can't think about anyone else but ourselves, because we're in so much pain. And I'm telling you what, when you start to surround yourself with people and you hear their stories, it will inspire you to kind of come out of yourself, get some healing, get some restoration, and move forward in life. And it's very exciting. So we're going to be a comeback church with some comeback stories. So this morning, I'm going to have you stand with me. We're going to pray over you. We're going to seal the deal. So if you want to raise your hands in response to what God's